It's a sleepy, struggling little town about 70 miles from the Canadian border. It sits on the Fort Peck Indian Reservation in northeast Montana. And like so many communities in the state, the mighty railroad runs right through it. Poplar, Montana. Population, about 800. You know, the kind of place where just about everyone knows something about everybody else. And just about everyone knew this young woman, Kimberly Ann Neese, a pretty girl getting ready to turn 18. In 1979, she was the valedictorian of her graduating class at Poplar High. Family members say she had some big plans. Seems she wanted to spread her wings and fly to Missoula to attend the University of Montana. Her aunt is Cindy Smith.
She'd tell it like it was. She was valedictorian of her high school class. She could party with the best of them and still maintain and do what she needed to do to be successful. She had success written all over her.
But just weeks after graduating, Kim's summer, her future success, and her young life would come to a brutal and tragic end. It happened here, in this open field, shaded by a few trees near the Poplar River, and less than 100 yards from Highway 2. It was in the early morning hours of June 16, 1979. Kim had been driving her daddy's pickup truck that night, and investigators say it was inside that truck where she was viciously beaten with a crescent wrench and possibly other tools before being dragged out of the truck on the passenger side and beaten more, until she breathed no more. There was no sexual assault, robbery, not a motive. Investigators say whoever took this young woman's life did so with vengeance and extreme anger. Kim's blood and hair were just about everywhere inside the cab of that truck. Outside, a pool of blood and clumps of Kim's hair where the final blows were delivered. She was hit in the head and neck dozens of times. Autopsy said her skull was completely crushed. Her lifeless, bloody body was then dragged 257 feet and rolled off this cliff along the Poplar River just underneath the train bridge, a popular hangout for kids in the area. Her attacker, or attackers, then crawled down to the riverbank and pushed her body into the water. Tomorrow, the clues left behind, including 3 sets of footprints along the drag trail, a bloody handprint on the passenger side of the pickup, more than 24 fingerprints, and a rather chilling early morning phone call.
I'm the guy that got the phone call at 5 in the morning, 2 hours before, supposedly before they found the body, and everything started rocking and rolling.
This is where young Kimberly Ann Neese was brutally murdered. An open field, now filled with more tall grass than when Kim was killed. Here's what the scene looked like when the murder occurred in the summer of '79. The area is located next to a train bridge near Poplar, Montana. Kids used to like to jump from the bridge into the Poplar River back when it was a lot deeper. Some even played train dodge, jumping off the bridge into the water as one of the many trains that roll through town chugged close to the bridge. Kim was one of them. Imagine. Her body discovered face up just feet away from the bridge where she used to swim and play. She had been brutally beaten to death with a crescent wrench and possibly other tools 257 feet away near some trees in this field. Her body dragged to this location before being rolled off the cliff and eventually pushed into the water. Left behind, seemingly, many clues, starting with 3 distinctive sets of footprints along the drag trail, one of them barefooted. There was a bloody palm print on the front passenger side panel of the pickup truck Kim was driving. FBI said whoever left that print is most likely Kim's killer. Oh, and there were 24 fingerprints. A few blocks away from the murder scene, a bloody towel was found draped on this fence. The question, whose blood's on that towel? 2 tribal police officers driving by the field on Highway 2, the main road in and out of Poplar, noticed the truck about 7 a.m. and began to investigate. I emphasize 7 a.m.
You know, I'm the guy that got the phone call at 5 in the morning, 2 hours before, supposedly before they found the body. And everything started rocking and rolling.
Dunn O'Connor says he was sound asleep the morning Kim Nees was killed when his phone rang. O'Connor says the caller was a friend, Sissy Atkinson. Says she told him Kim Nees had been killed down by the Poplar River, supposedly 2 hours before law enforcement knew anything about it. Tomorrow, the investigation. An investigation even the prosecutor in the case, one Mark Roscoe, yes, the same man who later became governor of Montana, acknowledged proved one thing. Not a single clue left behind would point the finger of guilt at anyone. And there's an alarming reason why. The investigation into the murder of Kimberly Ann Nees was, from the very beginning, a nightmare. Poplar Police, the FBI, Roosevelt County Sheriff's Office, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and Tribal Police were all involved. And in 1979, it seems those investigators managed to corrupt the entire crime scene, destroy key evidence, and render additional evidence useless. Even the Roosevelt County Sheriff admitted scientific evidence was contaminated, evidence mishandled, improper law enforcement procedures occurred, a lot of mistakes made in the investigation, no one in charge at the crime scene. Much of the evidence went unprotected, footprint evidence improperly handled, photographs taken inadequate. Early on, there were 12 suspects, and the more than 24 fingerprints collected at the crime scene either didn't or couldn't match a one. And then, as in all small towns, the rumors began.
Maybe it was her boyfriend, Greg Norgard. He was the prime suspect from the very beginning. He was dating Kim Nees at the time of her murder. In fact, he says he took her out the night before she was killed to the drive-in movies. He says he got her home about midnight, went back out to the American Legion Club for more drinks. Says he got home about 2 o'clock in the morning, and when he didn't see Kim's truck in her driveway, went back out looking for her but couldn't find her. Greg Norgard declined to be interviewed. Also, Billy McClammy, she was Kim's best friend at the time. She's now Greg Norgard's wife. She also said no to an interview request.
And then there were rumors about 3 girls, one of whom was said to have been jealous and angry after Kim had gone out with the father of her child the night before the murder. Those rumors intensified after the local paper reported this man, Stevie Grayhawk, the father of one of the 3 girls under suspicion, allegedly broke into the police evidence room a day or two after the murder. Grayhawk was a policeman at the time in Poplar.
Well, how did, since you live here, you must know, how did the thing get started that you broke into the evidence room?
That is what I'd like to know. That is the part I want to find out who the hell said it. Because if I find out whoever said it, first I'll go to court with whoever said it. I would love to go to court with that person to make him prove every bit of it. Put him on lie detector. Put him there to take him out. Because I'd like to know it too. Because when I saw it in the paper, I read it, I was shocked.
Stevie Grayhawk never sued anyone for saying he broke into the police evidence room, including the local newspaper that reported it. Sissy Atkinson was also investigated as a possible suspect. She has always claimed she was in bed at 11 p.m., hours before Kim was killed. But remember Dunn O'Connor, who said Sissy called him at 5 a.m., 2 hours before police knew anything about the murder?
She told me that they found Kim Nees's body down by the train bridge. She's dead.
Sissy wanted nothing to do with me or my request for an interview, and she even sent me a message the second time I'd tried to meet with her. Over the years, 3 people, including her own brother, said Sissy had implicated herself in the death of Kim Nees. Joanne Jackson is another member of those 3 girls investigated by police. She told Dateline the same story Sissy had. She was in bed that murderous night at 11 o'clock. And this woman, Jordis Ferguson, was investigated as a possible witness to Kim's murder. She ran as fast as she could the moment I asked her if she would agree to an interview. So, in large part, because of law enforcement mistakes, a crime scene seemingly so rich in clues is rendered clueless, and the search for Kim's killer goes stone cold. But almost 4 years later, a shocking development. That story tomorrow only on the KULR-8 News at 10. In the tiny town of Poplar, Montana, the agony for friends and relatives of young Kim Neese was almost unbearable. By 1983, almost 4 years had passed and she was laid to rest, the victim of a horrible beating. A once sparkling life with so much promise taken away, her body dumped in the Poplar River. The death of the National Honors graduate seemed to break the heart of this little town. And then there was the fear, because a killer is still on the loose. 2 of the suspects who lived just doors down from Kim Neese along this quiet street had apparently been cleared, including her boyfriend, Greg Norgard, who lived in this house, and Barry Beach, who lived just a few more houses away on the same side of the street. Oh, there were lots of rumors, but no suspect, no one behind bars. Until a shocking development 1,700 miles away in Monroe, Louisiana. Turns out Beach, a classmate of Kim Neese, had left Poplar 2 weeks after she was killed to spend the summer with his father and stepmother in Louisiana. When he returned to Poplar that fall, he was picked up for the first time by the Roosevelt County Sheriff's Department for questioning about Kim's murder. Beach provided fingerprint evidence and submitted to a polygraph, which he passed. The following June, 1980, Beach was questioned again, and again he was released. And again, he went to Louisiana. But this time, in January of 1983, Beach found himself in the custody of Monroe, Louisiana authorities.
Beach's stepmom had called authorities telling them that Beach was trying to help her teenage daughter and a couple of other teenagers run away to Houston, Texas. She also told them that Beach had been a suspect in a murder in Poplar, Montana. Well, it turns out that Louisiana authorities had some unsolved murders of their own. 3 women.
And just when Beach thought he was about to be released from custody on a misdemeanor charge of contributing to the delinquency of a minor, he instead found himself in a police interrogation room. Beach says authorities there told him he'd fry in the state's electric chair if he didn't fess up to the 3 murders in their neck of the woods.
I was truly terrified of the Louisiana judicial system. I honestly and completely felt that they would execute me.
Beach had been in custody for days, and from a legal standpoint, wasn't taken before a judge in the 72 hours required by law. Beach's uncle says he was denied the right to bail him out on the misdemeanor charge. Then, in that interrogation room, the conversation suddenly switched to Kim Neese. Beach says he was asked to speculate about how the murder of Kim Neese might have taken place, and was asked to give a hypothetical story about the crime using himself as the perpetrator. Says he also heard the detective say if he'd just confessed to killing her, they'd help him prove his innocence in Montana. So, he did. Tomorrow, what Beach told Louisiana authorities about why he killed Kim Neese and how he did it. A winding area of the Poplar River where a sandbar juts out. It's called Sandy Beach. This is where Barry Beach says he was partying with 2 friends the afternoon before Kim Neese was killed. Beach says it was late in the afternoon when he tried to leave the area, but says his car was stuck in the sand, and in his effort to drive it out, says he blew the transmission. Beach told Montana authorities investigating Kim Neese's death that he started walking home and caught a ride along the way with a couple of friends. Beach lived in this neighborhood with his mother and stepdad, in fact on the same side of the street as Kim, who lived just a few doors down in this home. Both had lived in the neighborhood since they were small children, and in fact, back in the day, they played together with the other kids on the block.
Beach says when he got home around 5:30 or 6 o'clock on the evening of June 15, 1979, no one was in the house. So he says he got something to eat, went upstairs after having partied for 2 straight days, climbed into bed, and says he slept until the next morning. In fact, he told authorities he didn't find out about Kim's death until much later in the day while branding cattle on his uncle's farm. Now, in the confession that he gave to Louisiana authorities, his story took a wicked turn.
Beach says he actually woke up a few hours after he went home and decided to go back out. It was Friday night, school out for the summer. He says he walked down the main drag of Poplar where he saw Kim Neese sitting alone in her daddy's pickup truck at this now burned down Exxon gas station. Beach says it was late at night, and others in town said the same. They saw Kim sitting alone in the pickup truck at the gas station at about 12:30 in the morning. Beach says they talked. He got in her truck, and they drove around for a while, ending up near the Poplar River where he says they parked. Beach says the two smoked some marijuana, a couple of joints, and after talking about their plans for the summer, he says he tried to kiss her. She refused and slapped him. Says he tried repeatedly until she ordered him out of the truck. Beach says he eventually became angry, and after having been slapped a second time, he punched her. Says Kim fought back. During the fight, he says he saw a crescent wrench on the floor of the truck, grabbed it, and began hitting her with it. Beach says Kim managed to open the driver's side door and get out, so he jumped out of the passenger side, ran around the pickup truck, and pushed her up against the vehicle and began choking her, and says he tried to kiss her again. Says when he saw a tire iron in the bed of the truck, he grabbed it and started beating her with it. She ran, he chased her, tackled her, and beat her until she was dead. Beach says he got scared, found a plastic garbage bag in the truck, pulled it up over Kim Nee's feet toward her neck, and dragged her from underneath her arms down to the Poplar River, where he dumped her body and eventually threw the murder weapons and the keys to her truck.
Beach says he started running for home. He stopped along the way, he says, to burn his blood-stained clothes inside a train boxcar. He says when he got home, he went upstairs, washed the blood off of his body, discarded those materials, and says he got into bed and tried to convince himself he didn't do it. That's the confession he gave to Louisiana authorities in January of 1983.
In your confession, you said you went home, you washed up, and you went to bed trying to convince yourself that you didn't kill her. Is it possible you spent your entire life trying to convince yourself you didn't do it? Barry Beach, the confession he says was coerced, this Sunday only on the KULR-8 News at 10. In your confession, you said you went home, you washed up, and you went to bed trying to convince yourself that you didn't kill her. Is it possible you spent your entire life trying to convince yourself you didn't do it?
It would have been a whole lot easier to sit here doing time, admitting to myself the truth, and just going on like the rest of my buddies in here. I've got all kinds of buddies in here, Greg, who committed their crimes. And they'll tell you right now they're at peace of mind because they're 6 feet above ground. Their victims are 6 feet below ground. I've never had that peace of mind. I know I don't belong in prison, and I know that the confession you're relying so heavily on right now is false.
Kim Nee's killer had been caught, confessed, tried, and convicted. This despite the fact there wasn't a shred of physical evidence or any eyewitnesses tying Barry Beach to her murder. In fact, none of Barry's friends or anybody in the small town of Poplar, for that matter, said they saw Beach anywhere the night of the killing. So it was his confession and his confession alone that put him in prison for 100 years with no chance of parole. A confession Beach insists was coerced.
If you follow Barry Beach's story, he says when he became so afraid of dying in Louisiana's electric chair, he lied, told the biggest lie of his life, told investigators he's the one who beat Kim Neese to death. He even gave a detailed description of how he says he did it. The question now is he lying again after being told that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars with no chance of parole?
Well, actually, Greg, I have adamantly stated that the confession was coerced and false from the moment that I walked out of the interrogation room.
Beach says the confession was coerced after several days of interrogation by lawmen in Louisiana, Detectives Jay Vi and Alfred Calhoun. And as it turns out, a few months later, those same detectives also elicited confessions from 2 other suspects in the murders of 3 women in Louisiana that turned out to be false. DNA eventually led to the real killer in that case. But when it comes to Beach's confession, does it seem to closely resemble, at least on the surface, the physical facts of the case and the killing of Kim Neese?
Last night I was reading over your confession, and I'm sitting here thinking, here's a guy who's 1,700 miles away from Poplar, Montana, and 3.5 years have passed. And in his confession, he basically says, 1, Kim was driving her dad's truck that night when she was killed, and that you saw her at the gas station where other people had seen her at the gas station that night. You said you smoked marijuana in the truck that night, that she was beaten to death with some kind of metal tool, and you said you picked up a crescent wrench in your confession and hit her with it. The fact that she was dragged to the river, that's part of your confession, and in fact she was dragged to the river. The fact that her car keys and the murder weapons were missing, and you said you took the car keys and threw them in the river along with the murder weapons. You'd have to say that to an outsider looking at a confession like that based on the physical facts of the case comes pretty close.
Not at all. Everything you just stated was common knowledge around Poplar, Montana, and especially around high school. Kim always sat at the Exxon station along with her age group. That was their parking lot of choice. My friend's parking lot of choice was the Conoco gas station 2 blocks down the street. We all had a different area of town where we parked and parked consistently. Everybody smoked marijuana. Everybody was talking about the crime scene even as early as the very next day. There were a lot of facts about the crime scene that were well known. You have to, if you're going to start judging the confession and you're going to start judging its accuracy and compared to what I say, then you need to go back to the 9 points that were identified by Sheriff Dean Malum as being issues that only the killer would know. Nothing that you just mentioned are listed in those 9 points.
Well, give me the bullet points of how your confession doesn't match the crime scene.
Barry Beach has spent more than 3 decades saying he didn't kill Kimberly Ann Neese. The 17-year-old Poplar High School valedictorian was murdered in 1979, beaten to death with a crescent wrench. Beach says his confession to law enforcement in Louisiana was based on well-known facts in the case, facts he says everyone in Poplar were aware of. And he said his confession did not contain critical elements only the killer would have known. One element of the crime that eluded authorities was the location of the murder weapon and the keys to the pickup Kim was driving. In his confession, Beach said he threw those items in the Poplar River.
Well, give me the bullet points of how your confession doesn't match the crime scene.
First and foremost, you just now mentioned the keys. The things that the police department said would be key that only the killer would know is the location of the keys. As you're well aware, my statement in the confession, they sent 3 FBI divers into the Poplar River trying to find the weapon and the keys according to what I stated in the confession. After 3 dives, they didn't find any of that. They didn't find the keys nor the weapon. One of the other key elements that the detective said only the killer would know is the fact that Kim Neese's body was dragged out of the passenger side of the vehicle. According to the confession, I said that she jumped out of the driver's side of the pickup. I ran around the pickup and caught her up against the driver's side of the vehicle, which is another key element. The amount of blood that was inside of the vehicle, Kim Neese definitely would have left blood on the driver's side of the vehicle had the confession been true. Yet there wasn't one speck of blood anywhere on the entire driver's side of the vehicle, nor were there any fingerprints ever found on the driver's side. They were all on the passenger side. Another key point that a lot of people overlook is that there were 7 piles of bloody hair forcefully removed from Kim Neese's head and some other person's head that were found on the ground surrounding Kim Neese's pickup on the passenger side. At no place anywhere in that confession do I talk about Kim Neese pulling my hair or me pulling her hair. Nowhere in that confession do I talk about taking the necklace off of her body. Nowhere in that confession do I talk about purposely and deliberately taking the time to fold her clothes, stack them, and place a beer can on top of them, neatly folded and stacked by the passenger side tire. None of that's in the confession, and yet every single bit of that was done at this crime scene. There were 2 fingerprints found on the dashboard of Kim Neese's pickup where the suspect who killed Kim reached in from the passenger side door. They left their fingerprints on the dashboard in Kim Neese's blood. They left their palm print on the side of the pickup in Kim Neese's blood. Nowhere in my confession anywhere do I talk about reaching into the passenger side of the door. According to the confession, everything that took place between me and Kim Neese took place outside of the vehicle. And I can go on if you want me to, because there's still more. And this is all forensic information. This isn't just public information. This is forensic information that the detectives and the authorities said only the killer would know, and I missed every single one of the 9 points.
Tomorrow, only on KULR-8, a woman comes forward, a witness, who tells a judge she spent a lifetime holding on to a childhood secret, a revelation that, for a time, dramatically changed Berry Beach's life.
Small towns and rumors, they pretty much go together like that, don't they? And when Kim Neese was killed and no one was immediately arrested, oh, there was hush talk in Poplar, Montana. In fact, most of those whispers suggested 3 girls were responsible for killing Kim. Seems Kim had gone out with a boy the night before who was the father of the child of one of those 3 girls. Police said they investigated. No one was arrested.
But decades later, during a 2011 hearing ordered by the state Supreme Court to determine if the man convicted of killing Kim Neese deserved a new trial, something seemingly extraordinary happened. This woman, Steffi Eagleboy, told Judge E. Wayne Phillips she had spent a lifetime holding tightly onto a secret from the time she was 10 years old. Steffi says the night Kim Neese was murdered, she and her cousin were sitting near this rock on the hill that overlooks the area where Kim breathed her last breath.
What did you hear that night?
Screaming, yelling around.
What kind of screaming?
I don't know, like somebody getting beat up or fighting or
What was being said? Anything?
just somebody chasing girls chasing another girl, telling them to get her. And the other girl running, crying, saying help me, and it's just something you can't forget.
After you heard this, what did you see?
Well, after we heard everything, we sat here and then we seen a cop car coming down from the road right here. And how I knew it was a cop car, because it had its lights on.
On top.
Yeah, had the lights on top. Then it came down the road. Then when it got to the 2 vehicles parked over this way, then it shut its lights off.
Now, after you've put 2 and 2 together over a period of time, you recognized, in your mind anyway, that Kim Neese was killed by a group of girls. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't you tell anybody?
Because I couldn't trust anybody. Everybody keeps asking me that. Why didn't you say anything? Because I don't trust anybody. I don't trust nobody. I didn't trust law enforcement then.
Well, if your version of what happened is true, there's an innocent guy sitting in prison.
Yes, there is. And it is true. Those girls are the ones that did it, not Barry. And I know that because I heard it. Barry didn't do it. Those girls did it.
A tightly held secret out of fear of law enforcement, and she says, a fear of those girls.
Do you feel like a burden has been lifted now that you've been able to at least say what you heard that night?
Yeah. I felt a relief. Big relief. But it's not over yet. Till he gets out. Then I'll feel a lot more better.
Judge Phillips cited Steffi's testimony as a major reason for his decision to order a new trial for Barry Beach. He also freed Beach on his own recognizance. Beach came to Billings, where he lived and worked in construction for 18 months. But the state Supreme Court, the same court that appointed Judge Phillips, overturned his decision following an appeal by the Attorney General's office, and Beach was returned to prison, where he sits today. She was there when young Kimberly Ann Neese was laid to rest on a June day in 1979. She was there 3.5 agonizing years later when Barry Beach was found guilty of murdering the class valedictorian and National Honors student.
Yeah, I believed it. He did it.
And finally, there was some comfort, some relief in the tiny town of Poplar. The killer had been caught, tried, and convicted. All the rumors finally hushed. And the killer would kill no more. He was sentenced to 100 years behind bars with no chance of parole. End of story. Well, not hardly. Fast forward to 2013.
Barry's not guilty.
Quite an unlikely and really shocking transformation for Glenna Lockman. Glenna Neese Lockman. Glenna is Kim's cousin. Both grew up in Poplar. And she believed with all of her heart Beach was the one who savagely beat her cousin to death when he was convicted. Now, she's fighting to free Beach from his prison cell. Glenna says her 180-degree turn occurred after new information was obtained by a group, Centurion Ministries, that works to free people it believes have been wrongly convicted.
Well, you've sort of been on an emotional roller coaster, haven't you? Because 1, nobody gets caught. 2, somebody confesses and goes to prison. 3, then you become doubtful about the person's guilt or innocence in prison. 4, you become aware of rumors that you have, to some degree, considered. So it's been kind of like this for you, is it not?
Very much so. But like I said, over the years, Centurion, I was with them pretty much almost every time they came to town. Any questions I had, they answered. And it's like, wow. Yeah, Barry Beach did not murder my cousin.
So now you're left with a dead cousin, a wrongly convicted man in your mind, and presumably a killer still on the loose.
Right.
Where's that leave you?
Well, at this point in time, that leaves me to do and help everyone in my power to get Barry Beach released. I'll never be satisfied, and I will never quit until justice is done.
Glenna is not alone. There are some very high-profile supporters calling for Beach's release, including U.S. Senator John Tester, former Montana Governor Brian Schweitzer, former U.S. Senator Conrad Burns, and former Lieutenant Governor John Bollinger. So, who killed Kim Neese? At the end of the day, it will very likely turn out only the killer and Kim will know the truth, and the rumors in Poplar, well, they will never be hushed. Poplar resident Dunn O'Connor is the one who says he got an early morning phone call telling him about Kim's murder hours before police knew anything about it. He seems to best reflect the feelings of many, not all, but many people in Poplar when it comes to the question of who killed Kim.
And you got to remember, the kid did sign a confession. Do I know Do I know that he did it? No. Do I know that these band of women did it? No. I know one damn thing. I got the phone call. I do know that. So whether he's innocent or guilty, I think that should be proven a little better than it was. More questions need to be asked. That's all I got to say.